Our next speaker is Dr. Kimberly Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan is an associate research professor at Boston University School of Public Health's Department of Environmental Health and the former associate scientific director for the VA Research Advisory Committee on Gulf War Veterans Illnesses. Dr. Sullivan co-chaired the joint VA-DoD Common Data Elements Working Groups for Gulf War illness and currently serves on multiple VA executive advisory committees for Gulf War illness research. She is a behavioral neuroscientist and the former principal investigator on the large multi-site Gulf War illness consortia that included GWIC, that included 9 study sites and was designed to determine the pathobiology of Gulf War illness. She is currently the PI and director of the large multi-site Boston Biorepository and Integrative Network for Gulf War illness, BBRAIN, that was designed to share biospecimens and foster collaboration among GWI researchers. She has received multiple honors for her work with veterans, including the Boston University Center for Military Health Soaring Eagle Award. I will now hand it over to you, Dr. Sullivan.
Hello, everyone. Let me see if I can get my screen to share here. Can you see that? Okay. Can you see my screen? Just want to make sure that it's showing.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you today. And I'm going to be talking about 2 consortia that I've run over the years that Sarah mentioned. So first is the Boston Gulf War Illness Consortium, and the second is the BBRAIN Repository Network. And they're both examples of how the research community is really working together to develop diagnostic markers and treatments for Gulf War illness. And we've heard over and over the years from our veterans that we should be working together to solve these issues. And we couldn't agree more. And so I want to tell you our progress to date by doing that, by working together. I'm just trying to move my slides here. Let's see. Okay, there we go. I want to first make sure that we acknowledge that this is the 31st anniversary of the Gulf War this week. I know all of you are aware of that, but I also want to thank you all for your service during the Gulf War, all of you veterans who are on today. We thank you for your service and your sacrifices. Just to give you a little overview of the Gulf War Illness Consortium. So this was designed to identify diagnostic markers and to develop treatments for Gulf War illness by working together to speed the progress of our research. And we had 10 study sites around the country, and we had preclinical, so animal and cell researchers working together hand in hand with our clinical researchers who work with our veterans. And the idea of that was to speed things up, to make the research happen faster. And as you can see here, this is just one of the pictures from one of our annual meetings. You'll recognize a lot of these faces. So Dr. Klimas, Dr. Steele, among others. And this was a really great team approach in terms of trying to develop treatments and diagnostic markers faster. So how did we do? So in terms of some of our key research accomplishments from the consortia, the GWIC consortia, and our follow-on studies, we had key research accomplishments, including the results of brain imaging, where we were the first to show inflammation in the brains of veterans with Gulf War illness by using PET imaging radio tracers of a protein called TSPO, which are located on the glial cells within the brain, as you can see on the right-hand side here. So the brain has neurons and lots of glial cells. And you can see the figure below, which shows the TSPO PET ligand has been activated in veterans with Gulf War illness compared with healthy controls, here in the red and the yellow. And basically you can see it's lighting up like a Christmas tree. So we're really seeing very clearly neuroinflammation in the brains of our veterans with Gulf War illness. And we've now been funded for several new brain imaging studies of PET imaging and machine learning, where we will tease out which types of glial cells are causing this brain inflammation. And why is that important? It's important because this will allow for a treatment development pipeline with strategic targets with already FDA-approved drugs. Of course, we want to use already FDA-approved drugs so that we can get these treatments to our veterans faster. We don't want to be in the place where we're developing treatments that take a long time to get out to the market. So these are repurposed FDA drugs that are already available, depending on the next results of which type of glia we see are activated. So what about other results? So we've also found that results of 2 of our ongoing studies are very promising as objective diagnostic tests for Gulf War illness. So first, when we looked at brain imaging markers of white matter glial changes in the brain, we found a 94% accuracy in classifying veterans with Gulf War illness. And when we looked at blood tests of central nervous system proteins that at some point leaked through the blood-brain barrier, we found that veterans with Gulf War illness had much higher levels of these autoantibodies, including things such as tau proteins in their blood than healthy veterans or individuals with similar types of disorders, such as chronic fatigue syndrome or irritable bowel syndrome. And when we added these autoantibody scores into a combined index score, we found that 90% of veterans with Gulf War illness scored above a level of 30, indicating a potential simple blood diagnostic test for Gulf War illness. Lastly, we found that levels of the chemical messenger glutamate and pro-inflammatory cytokines were significantly higher in the blood of veterans with Gulf War illness than our healthy veterans. So collectively, these results suggest strong targets for Gulf War illness based on central nervous system changes, and that a simple diagnostic test is well within reach. And these are also there are also FDA approved drugs and supplements available for these central nervous system targets as well. So in terms of the consortium, so for the GWIC consortium, we actually ended up with 40 publications that came from the consortium and 2 additional consortia that got funded from it. And one of them is the BBRAIN repository network. And the other one is the GWIC-TIC that you heard about from Dr. Klimas. In addition to that, Dr. Klimas mentioned, so we had a small biorepository as part of the GWIC studies, and we actually were able to provide samples and data to 20 additional studies just from the small GWIC consortia. And so we wanted to build on that. And we then got funding for the Boston Biorepository and Integrative Network for Gulf War Illness, or BBRAIN. And so BBRAIN is an example of a resource developed specifically to encourage collaboration and speed the process of scientific discovery. But it also serves as an important source to validate samples, which is equally important for a biorepository. There are lots of studies that have come out that have small sample sizes, for example, and need to be validated in larger samples. So this is the ability for us to now do that. And BBRAIN is really designed to be a conduit for scientific collaborations within the Gulf War illness research community that builds upon the GWIC and makes it even larger. And so just due to the highly successful research collaborations from the GWIC, we thought that natural next step would be to increase this highly valuable resource by replenishing the GWIC samples and increasing our diagnostic and treatment capabilities by including investigators from additional study sites around the country. So we have 8 additional study sites now within the BBRAIN repository network. So we heard your thoughts to us, and we heard our veterans telling us to work together. And we are doing just that. So BBRAIN now is serving as a core resource for current and future biomarker studies. So we have established an infrastructure through the BBRAIN, which is providing much needed repository samples and data mining from other studies to be successful in biomarker and translational studies. So why is that important? So we are taking information that is being shared with us from other studies and data mining, putting them together with other data to see if we have more power to see these biomarkers and potential for treatment development. And we have a strong track record of translating these biomarkers from animal and cell studies to the clinic, and BBRAIN is building upon this expertise. So in this way, BBRAIN and GWIC-TIC are working hand in hand to provide the infrastructure for biomarker development and targeted treatment trials. CDMRP funded us for both of these trials, both of these consortia, and they gave the option for other studies to share samples with BBRAIN and for other studies to request samples for BBRAIN for their studies. And we're actually doing just that right now. So we're actively getting samples from other studies and we're sharing samples and data. So other studies, for example, if they've got a 3-year funded study, they don't have to wait 2.5 out of the 3 years because they're collecting all their data. that we can actually give them their samples much sooner than that, and they can start doing their analyses much more quickly. So we're really trying to speed up this process of biomarker and treatment development. And BBRAIN has developed a menu of available samples and data that investigators can request on our website, and that is available to our, that will be sent to our steering committee for approval of samples and data sharing. And that's really important, that we make sure that these requests are appropriate, that they're related to Gulf War illness, and that they are appropriate for the use of these very valuable samples that our veterans are sharing with us. This is a little menu of the biorepository, so the BBRAIN repository, data and samples that are available. So we are currently collecting blood, plasma, serum, saliva, stool samples, and urine samples from 500 Gulf War veterans, as well as demographic surveys and cognitive test data. We also have brain imaging that is available within the repository network that we're sharing with others. This is the contact information for us. And we're actively sharing as we're getting this data. But we need more people to participate in our studies to get the samples that we need to share with others within this network. In terms of request form for investigators, so investigators can request samples and data with this simple online form that is reviewed and approved by a steering committee and our Gulf War advisory members. And again, we make sure that these are appropriate requests of your very valuable samples and data. This is a publication of that just came out in Life Sciences, special issue on Gulf War illness, and it describes all of the data and samples available within the biorepository network for BBRAIN. And it also describes that we've recently added COVID-19 questions to our demographic and surveys as well, because we've had a lot of questions about that from veterans, and so we're trying to address that as well. So we're able to adjust as we go as well to add things to surveys as things come up, like a pandemic. In terms of additional things that we're doing, one of the things we thought was very important is the common data elements within our field. So we worked with Dr. Klimas's group, and this was funded by VA and the Department of Defense. And we actually had some workshops where we worked as a team of researchers looking at Gulf War illness common data elements and making recommendations for those. So what does that mean? So these are common core tests that we recommend that all studies use. At least these, they can add additional ones, but we would like them to use one core set of test methods. And the reason for that is because then we can compare across studies in a way that makes sense. So we're comparing apples to apples on, biomarker or treatment trial studies rather than apples to oranges if people use different tests for each of their studies. So we think this is very, very important in moving the field forward. And we've published on these common data elements now in that Life Sciences special issue I just mentioned, with Cohen et al. That's freely available for anybody who would like to take a look at that. And we also have published on cognitive outcome common data elements, so cognitive tests that also are very important because a lot of cognitive tests are being used for some of the treatment trials. So we want to make sure we can compare the outcomes as apples to apples rather than apples to oranges. We have plans for additional common data element publications. And so one area we'd like to be focusing on is exposure outcomes. So Dr. Klimas mentioned, some of these exposures that we've been doing studies on for many years. Things such as, hearing chemical weapons, being exposed to low-level sarin from the Camisea weapons depot detonations, those pyridostigmine bromide anti-nerve gas pills, pesticides. We know these are associated with Gulf War illness, and we would like to have common data elements where the studies are asking these exposure questions the same way, so that then we can compare across studies and we can data mine by putting these the results of the studies together eventually and have more power to see different outcomes in different biomarker studies. So that's something you'll be seeing soon. We hope to have this published, but that's what we're working on in terms of common data elements at the moment. So what about our results from our prior studies? So we're doing some data mining now from the BBRAIN prior studies that our collaborators have shared with us. And I just wanted to give you some sense of what it's looking like in terms of the different functional areas that our veterans have been having trouble with over the years. So for example, if on the left-hand side here, these are the survey instruments. So The first one is the multidimensional fatigue inventory. So this was recommended in the common data elements, and we've now combined data from our BBRAIN retrospective studies, and now we have over 300 veterans answering this question. And we see, in fact, that for this survey, this validated survey, that our veterans with Gulf War illness report much higher fatigue on this scale than our veteran controls. Again, the same thing for this pain scale called the McGill. We see the same thing. Our veterans with Gulf War illness are showing much higher report of pain on this than our healthy controls. Same thing for the PSQI, the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. And we also see it on several cognitive test outcomes. So on verbal memory, so a measure called the California Verbal Learning Test. We see the same thing. So all of these things were recommended in the common data elements, and we are now able to validate them with the BBRAIN retrospective data that we will hope to publish shortly. So we just want to show what's coming from this data that our veterans have shared with us, and that our research teams are now pooling together so we can validate these common data elements and say which of these measures should be used in future and current biomarker and treatment trials. So this is the organizational structure for BBRAIN. As you can see, we have our steering committee, we have our prior studies, so our retrospective studies who are sharing this data some of the data I just showed you, as well as samples. And we are doing new recruitment at 4 study sites around the country. So this is in Boston, at the Miami VA and Nova Southeastern University, at the Bronx VA and the San Francisco VA. And this is a 1-day study where we're trying to recruit 500 veterans for our new study, for this newer recruitment for BBRAIN. So then we can share this with all of the rest of the researchers in our community. And again, this is to speed up the results of our biomarker and treatment trial. Okay, so in terms of what we have so far in terms of our demographic outcomes for BBRAIN, this is in the new recruitment. You know, we're trying to get to that 500 mark. We're at about 115 or so recruited so far. So we're getting there, and especially during the middle of this pandemic, I think we're doing as well as we can, but we need more participants. You know, we'd really like to get to that 500 mark as quickly as possible. I will show you in terms of our outcome for our veterans who have Gulf War illness and our healthy controls. The breakdown of age and gender and race is pretty similar, so we're doing pretty well there. However, in terms of the breakdown of women veterans, we have about 13% right now. We'd really like to do better on that. We have a lot of questions about whether women veterans look different than our male veterans on a lot of our Gulf War illness and other outcomes. So we'd really like to get more women veterans. So if you're out there and you're listening today, we'd really love to have you come and do our study. What else are we seeing? So in terms of health outcomes from the BBRAIN study so far, as I mentioned, we are starting to collect information on COVID-19. So we do know who's tested positive and who hasn't, at least as much as our veterans know that on their surveys, and who's also gotten the vaccine. So we can actually provide this data to researchers who are interested in looking at that. We also, as I mentioned before, we have these common data elements that we're trying to validate. So that fatigue scale continues to be something that we're seeing that's higher in our veterans with Gulf War illness versus our healthy controls, the pain scale, as well as the sleep measures. So we are able to, again, with our newer study participants, showing that these scales are sensitive and specific to Gulf War illness in that respect, that we're able to validate them and they will stay in the common data elements. This is our website for the BBRAIN. And our contact information, so our email and telephone number, our website. We also have a very active social media page, and we'd love to have a look at that. We put up everything that we're doing on our social media accounts, including publications that we try to make freely available. If there's anything on there that you would like to get, that please contact us, and we'd be happy to share that with you. We want our veterans to see what's coming from this research and from your time and coming to do this for us. So we very much appreciate that. So what are our future directions? So what we'd like to do is validate our prior blood and brain imaging diagnostic markers of Gulf War illness that I already mentioned. So we're actively doing that in ongoing studies. We'd like to identify objective biomarkers of Gulf War illness with that tau protein that I mentioned and those central nervous system autoantibodies in the blood, as well as blood markers of that excitatory transmitter glutamate and inflammatory pro-inflammatory cytokine markers as well. And that gets us closer towards a diagnostic test for Gulf War illness, a simple blood test, we hope. And we're also focusing on these markers for current and planned treatment trials. And we're working hand in hand with GWIC for that. And so some of the things you'll be seeing coming down the line is a much larger study of low glutamate diet with Dr. Holton. So we're going to have a multi-site trial of that coming in the fall. We're also studying supplements, Bacopa and N-acetylcysteine, which you'll be hearing about in the very near future. Other future studies that we are currently funded for that we'll be studying in the very near future, one of them is called the new BBRAIN study. So this is called the non-exclusionary wave study, which will give more veterans a chance to participate in research studies. So in the past, we've tried to keep our case criteria pretty tight, and we sometimes have to exclude veterans who have Gulf War illness, but other conditions as well, these other comorbid conditions. So this new study will include veterans who have Gulf War illness and a lot of those other comorbid conditions. And we are doing that so that we can try and see if veterans with Gulf War illness also develop some of these conditions later, or if Gulf War veterans with Gulf War illness who don't have these conditions look similar or different than those who do have these other conditions. So we're very excited to start that study in the fall. So if you have been not able to participate in some of our prior studies, please do reach out to us because you may well be able to participate in this new BBRAIN study. We also have a study of tau markers, those tau proteins I was telling you about, where we'll do PET brain imaging and blood testing for these tau proteins. And we also have several studies of Gulf War women where we now have funded to look at reproductive health outcomes. And this one will be starting again in the fall. Again, there's been so many questions about reproductive health outcomes, and we really didn't have enough data to answer that properly. And we hope to be able to start addressing those questions with this new study. We also have a practitioner's grant. So this is studied to identify gaps in patient-provider communication and to improve care for our veterans with Gulf War illness. So we've heard again and again our veterans telling us, I go to my primary care provider, whether it's VA or outside, private, and they just don't know anything about Gulf War illness, and they don't know how to treat me with my illness. And so this is a grant specifically designed to improve that by working with practitioners. So that will be coming down the line shortly as well. With that, I want to thank all of the veterans who have participated in our studies currently and over the years. None of this progress would have been made possible without you willing to come and do these studies for us. So we don't take that for granted, and we're very, very thankful for your time and willingness to stick with us and to participate in our studies. So thank you very much.